I just want to preface this whole thing by saying that this was hands down the most terrifying and reckless thing I've ever done. I know that some of you out there reading this probably want to experience a DMT injection firsthand, or are at least curious about it, while others have made their minds up, like I did, and cannot or will not allow themselves to be persuaded otherwise. To the curious I say, don't let yourselves be fooled by some documentary you saw on TV or some random post on the internet with some idiot saying that he did it before and was absolutely fine. Those people are either professionals in a lab setting or people that have no business saying you can and should inject yourself with DMT sitting behind a screen. And to all the other lost souls looking for answers and decided that this was the way to go, may God have mercy on your everlasting soul. I am 24 years old, and live with my girlfriend and 2 dogs. I have a shiny new car, an awesome job, savings, investments, and an incredibly loving family. I am lucky, considering I spent 4 years in an active heroin addiction while homeless on the streets of New Orleans, and 2 years in prison. I've been out for about 2 years now, and off the hard drugs for about 4. Living in New Orleans gives you access to a lot of things. Quick drug rap sheet includes heroin, ecstasy and other opiates, cocaine, meth, MDMA, weed daily for 6 years, methadone, Suboxone, 2CE, 2CB, GHB, ecstasy, lots of acid, lots of mushrooms that grow wild down here, Xanax and other benzos, Adderall and other amphetamines, salvia, nitrous oxide, and all kinds of weird pills. Yeah, you get the point. I've been completely sober for about a year from everything else except acid and mushrooms, which I believe to be a true cure for clinical anxiety and depression. I trip 3 times a year with my girlfriend, and my quality of life continues to improve with these tools like it never has before. A few weeks ago my girlfriend and I watched a documentary about ayahuasca, and she expressed interest in trying it or other DMT-containing substances. I was also, as I had never tried it, so I made a few clicks and had a half gram of DMT show up at my house quickly. I freebased for the first 3 experiences and they were incredible. I broke through on my first try and felt like I was communicating with entities that wanted to show me the secrets of the world. I felt the most deepest feelings of joy and warmth and came away feeling like life wasn't the end. Sadly, my girlfriend couldn't handle the smoke and regrettably choked and coughed and couldn't hold a single hit down. Probably for the best. This stuff isn't for everyone. At some point I suggested maybe she could for the drug, and she shot it down immediately. She said there was no way she was going to try something by injecting it. Unfortunately, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The seed was planted and the thought kept creeping up on me in the following days, and I eventually decided I would do it. I found an easy method to dissolve the freebase with an acid on the internet. It seemed simple, but to get the mixture just right you had to be exact, and know the molar weight of the 2 substances you were trying to dissolve. I had no idea how much I was doing. I didn't have anything that could measure out to 0.01 grams, so I eyeballed what I thought was about 50 milligrams of freebase and mixed it with 0.36 milliliters of white vinegar. The ratio of acid to freebase was pretty good though, as it almost all completely dissolved when I added a bit of heat and distilled water. There was a bit of plant matter and a yellowish tint, but hey, I've done way worse. Oh god. I used a cotton filter and drew up the entire mixture. I went to my bedroom and found a belt and tied off. I had not 4D anything in 4 years, but it was like riding a bike. I found a vein, hit oil, and pushed the plunger way down, but something stopped me at the last second from pushing it all the way down, so I pulled it out with about 25 units left in the syringe. It was probably the only thing that stopped me from passing out. I had enough time to turn off the lights and fall onto my bed. I could begin to feel it. I shut my eyes and heard it whoosh over me, and then I was in total blackness. It came on like electricity. White flashed in my vision, and the next thing I remember is the weirdest, and I mean weirdest, patterns and shapes. It was so vivid. I remember wanting it to stop. They were like comic colors and outlines, shapes and geometry, pink and yellow and always changing. There was a circle. It was all so weird and so fast. But it wasn't distorted at all. It was all in super high definition, like I could have touched it, but I couldn't do anything but sit and watch and let the drug take its toll on me. It felt like getting hit by a planet. I immediately regretted all of my actions leading up to this point. My mind was obliterated. I remember thinking that I was probably not going to remember any of this and that I was likely going to pass out soon. It is possible that I did pass out because I mostly don't remember much of the initial visions. It's almost like my brain couldn't even process what it saw and trashed the memories because they were so far from reality. I do remember thinking something was laughing at me and thinking I was crazy. I also remember specifically thinking that I was not going to die, however I was going to be forced to endure the terrible consequences of my actions. I would alternately get good vibes and then bad. Things would go fast and then slow. The good vibes were of the faintest sort and the bad vibes were full and truly terrifying in the deepest, darkest way. My skin is crawling while I'm writing this. Everything seemed hostile and alien. I don't think I can properly convey with words that I was in a completely alien existence, with no clue as to what was happening, who I was, what I was seeing, that I did drugs, or anything else. The removal from this world was complete. I do remember having the thought that it was incredible that I could even be seeing these things at all, that my brain could create these pictures and that everything was so distinctly weird and unreal. But I was there, forced to endure the visions of an alien nightmare. I couldn't even remember who or what I was. I remember thinking at some point about love, and maybe it could bring me back, but it was like a pained lost love sort of emotion. Like I'd never see anyone ever again. Then, I saw these animal-looking people, male and female in pairs, and they would laugh and then stare, laugh and then stare. I wanted it to stop so badly, but I knew I had to wait it out. I remembered being in a wreck, and being an addict. I felt deep shame, and yet I kept defiantly reassuring myself, somehow, that I was a good person with value. It seemed so tiny compared to the shame I felt, though. It felt like the animal people were laughing at me. I would fight the feeling of shame by saying no, I have worth, and the animal people's expression would change to something akin to slight admiration, like watching someone fight back against a fight they were obviously losing, and then I would become terrified again and they would resume laughing or staring. I want you to keep in mind that all of this happened basically in what seemed like an instant, and that I am trying to use words to describe feelings and visions so completely utterly devoid of anything positive or familiar that I don't think I can properly describe what happened without most of the terror being lost in translation. Anyone who has done DMT can probably relate to this, and everyone else just rest assured that this was an experience that was brutal and harrowing in the most extreme and uncommon sense. Also, throughout all of this was a physical feeling of being shredded by a million razors. There was also an even more intense sensation that my mind basically was being sucked out of my skull through a tiny pinhole, and also feeling like being shot out of a cannon, all at the same time. None of it was pleasant in the slightest most remote way, and all of it was awful and horrifying on a magnificent scale that words will never capture. I still find it surprising that I didn't black out, and I'm still not convinced that I didn't, although I really don't remember losing consciousness. Suddenly I realized I wasn't breathing, and I took a huge gasp of breath. I felt the rig in my hand and I saw my girlfriend screaming at me, saying you could have died, you could have died. My girlfriend was not home, I was alone during all of this. Throughout all of it I kept telling myself I'm not going to die, I just have to wait it out, I'm going to be okay. It felt like it was never going to end though, and after what felt like the 1000th modern art exhibit on steroids, nothing seemed to be coming back to me. I still didn't know who I was and I started to panic. Everything started to get red and I could see the animal people start to visibly get freaked out. red lights started flashing, and alarm bells were going off. It seemed like they were saying, oh, he might actually die. They almost started waving to me, like trying to get me to do something. At some point I stood up. I opened my eyes and started beating on my chest. I kept beating on my chest and gasping and thinking, I can't die like this, I can't die like this. I looked at the bathroom and I looked at the door to the bedroom and I couldn't tell which was which. Nothing made sense at all. There were arrows on the floor and on the walls and the ceiling, all pointing and moving. It was like being in a fish tank almost. I actually smiled for a brief moment despite the terror because I could not tell which door went where in my house, and it amazed me that something could have this profound of an effect on my perception. They both looked the same. I stood there for a while and kept beating on my chest and breathing. I didn't even feel like a person. I could barely feel my hands. I felt like a flimsy cardboard cutout, I felt like I was a piece of paper. I just had to keep breathing, that was all I knew, all I could pull off, and I would come back eventually if I didn't die. The room had a red glow like off of the Silent Hill trailer, and even though the lights were off and the room was dark, everything seemed to be lit up from behind my eyes. Eventually I stumbled out of the bedroom and into the kitchen. I tried to look at the clock to figure out how long I had been tripping while telling myself I'm not gonna die, I'm not gonna die. At this point I vaguely knew who I was and where I was, but still not what had happened. I could still see visuals swirling even though I was walking around. I couldn't focus on anything. It was like being in a big dirty fish tank. I kept trying to remember who I was and what was happening. Vinegar. It was vinegar and I couldn't really seem to remember exactly what happened, or what I had put into my body. Finally I got a good look at the clock and I knew I wasn't gonna die. Yet. I had to verbally tell myself it was vinegar, and DMT, and water. I was scared that maybe I was poisoned, or that I had mixed in a chemical that I hadn't meant to on accident, but as I slowly came to, this fear started to dissipate, and the fear was replaced by something like anger. I sat down and was amazed to see that I still had the syringe in my hand with 25 units of DMT solution in the barrel. I crawled myself outside as the visuals faded and squirted the rest of that into the air and bent the rig in half. I watched the sunset behind the trees and just felt lucky to be alive while my dogs licked my face. The total length of time of the trip was 35 minutes. No one was home while I was doing this. No one knows I did this. I feel compelled to warn anyone else that might attempt this, though. I had no trip sitter, and none would have known if something had gone terribly wrong. For a brief second I thought my girlfriend was going to come home and find me dead with a needle in my hand. There was no way I could have even found my phone, much less use it to call 911 if I had to. I have done things like this a million times and never once thought about safety. I thought I knew the risks. I didn't. Although I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, I thought I had a pretty good idea. Even though I took precautions with sterilizations, none of that meant anything once I got blasted to the center of the universe. To anyone out there thinking of doing this, I implore you to change your mind.
The second story is coming up next.
DMT in pure crystal form is highly difficult to come by where we are from. Finally, we got lucky. We managed to secure a gram of the stuff. I was more experienced in psychedelics than my friend, who was going to be tripping with me. We had both done shrooms, LSD, and MDMA mostly. We smoked lots of weed too. But I had done somewhat more. I was really excited and looking forward to trip. My friend seemed somewhat anxious. It was fall. It was dark outside. A Friday night after work in Nordic Europe. my friend came to pick me up from my apartment. At his studio apartment we would smoke DMT tonight. We decided to start at low doses and do rotations, one guy tripping and one guy trip sitting, then do a switch. So we started. It turned out, our scale was broken, and unable to measure DMT crystals accurately. In the hindsight, we should have prepared by buying a more accurate scale. We decided to eyeball it. This was a big mistake. We eyeballed a very low amount of DMT to a glass freebase pipe. I went first, sat on the couch and took a puff. I really didn't know what to expect, so we waited for a while. I got a slight color enhancement, but didn't really feel anything other than that. We reloaded our pipe and my friend had a go. He also didn't notice anything too interesting, other than color enhancement. We decided to up the ante and loaded about 2 times the amount from earlier. We also decided that it would be better to smoke while sitting on my friend's bed, and when the trip starts, just lie down. I went first. Took a couple of hits and laid down on the bed. I closed my eyes and saw LSD-like visuals, but they seemed more 3D or 4D in movement, if that makes any sense. I still somehow felt underwhelmed by the experience. My friend smoked after me and also reported seeing similar shapes. Then I decided I wanted to have a true breakthrough experience. I told my friend to load the pipe with about 3 times more DMT than earlier, which was about 6 times more than the initial dose. Keep in mind there was still some DMT in the pipe from earlier. I told my friend to shut all the lights and leave the room when I hand him the pipe. I took maybe 6-7 pretty big hits from the pipe. During the last 2 hits, my reality started to seriously shatter. Everything started warping and colors started becoming so bright, it was like someone was pointing 1,000 different color flashlights straight at my face. With my last grasp of reality, I saw my friend taking the pipe from my hands. At this time, my perception of time was getting really messed up. I saw my friend sitting right next to me, then I saw an image of him walking to the bathroom, leaving the room like I told him, then I saw him at the bathroom door looking at me. Suddenly, he teleported back next to me and switched between these 3 positions for some time. This all happened in a matter of seconds. Then he shut down the lights and I was blasted into space and lost all contact with reality. I saw amazing colors and impossible patterns. It's like I didn't exist. This lasted for an unknown amount of time. Then I saw familiar places. Real-life places I had recently been to. For example, my friend's balcony, where we smoked cigarettes earlier. Then I saw myself outside of my friend's apartment. I kept teleporting between these and other locations very rapidly. Then, I was overwhelmed by extreme fear and anxiety. Around this time, my friend came back to the room and asked if I was okay. I started muttering some gibberish. I don't know what triggered it, but after this, my fear and anxiety escalated to the point that I thought I had somehow killed my friend. Because I was so messed up on a drug. And all those locations I saw were actual places I had been to while on a drug. I saw images of my friend lying dead on the floor, bleeding. I had hallucinatory conversations with police officers and my parents after it felt like I had murdered my friend. I saw myself in jail. I started crying and repeating the phrases, "Did I really do this? I can't believe I did it," while being in total shock. My friend realized I was having an extremely bad trip and started comforting me. He held my hand and told me it was going to be over soon and that everything would be fine, over and over again. I held onto my friend's leg extremely firmly with my hands all this time, for some reason. This apparently lasted for minutes until I finally started returning to reality. I was still worried about my friend, but then I saw him sitting next to me. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. I constantly asked him if he was real and if anything I just saw was real. I was still seeing some pretty strong visuals. It was as if the world was made of Minecraft blocks for some reason. It took me around 15 minutes to come fully back to my senses. The actual trip felt like a lifetime, when actually the roughest part was over in 10 minutes. In retrospect, smoking this stuff while not knowing the actual dosage is a very bad idea. I have never thought about any particular psychedelic experience as much as this. For months, I saw very unsettling flashbacks and dreams about this trip. Even though it was a bad trip, it taught me a lot about myself. It made me really think about my substance use. It also made me a more peaceful person. I would never want to live that nightmare in real life.
The third story is next.
At the time of this experience I was 23 years old, weighed 125 pounds, and was in good mental and physical health. I take no prescription or over-the-counter medications, but use marijuana and yerba mate on a daily basis. I have taken a variety of substances, but my major interest lies with the psychedelics. For tryptamines at the time of this experience I had familiarity with everything from mushrooms, LSD, Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, ayahuasca, yopo and sable seeds, DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. For phenethylamines at the time of this experience I had familiarity with various species of Trichocereus cacti, 2CI, 2CE, MDMA, MDA, methylone, and some dog splatters. I had also experimented with some dissociatives such as salvia divinorum, nitrous oxide, ketamine and DXM. This was by no means my first experience with DMT. I had been frequently experimenting with this substance on its own or in combination with other substances and had gained a high level of comfortability, enjoyment and awe of the experiences possible with this substance. Set and setting, my room, alone at night time. I had taken a small amount of MDMA earlier in the evening, and was in a mood to continue exploring altered states of consciousness. I felt the desire to smoke some DMT and so I did my usual setup ritual, dim lighting, comfortably seated against a wall with a pillow at my back, and some calm, chill music lined up to anchor my consciousness during re-entry. The experience, as I rolled the stem of the pipe back and forth, heating, scrounging the remnants of DMT stuck to the sides of the glass vessel, I said, holding the flame and spinning the pipe, I asked to connect to my higher self. Show me something different. Show me something I haven't seen before. And then I breathed in. Once, hold, exhale. Second hit, hold, with just a little more vapor coming up the tube. There was a dull humming sound like that of an old and cranky vacuum cleaner. The kind of dull, grating mechanical noise that makes your head hurt. Every summer afternoon ruined by lawnmowers and weed whippers, every dog terrified of the menacing, vibrating, ear-busting vacuum cleaner. This terrible painful pressure in my skull seemed to be forcing my head downwards. I went with it, remembering how I have been directed into certain body positions before on DMT, to good effect. I was directed into a position of abasement, seeking to escape the pain. With a fanfare of trumpets a tear opened up in the fabric of space and time. Something whispered to me that I was being brought into the presence of someone worthy of great respect, and that I was privileged. Through this hole made his entrance, a kind of gloating, arrogant male entity. It was this thing making that terrible humming noise. For a moment, His Majesty spoke to me though I couldn't understand the words. It reminded me of Star Wars, A New Hope. Admittedly, I went through a Star Wars geek phase, when all the droids are in the big sand transport and moving around, squeaking and twittering at one another. This threw me off about as much as it would throw you off if your computer started trying to communicate to you based on its own personal language derived from its binary encoding. Or maybe your computer would suddenly be speaking fluid Japanese. Surely the language of machines? Then I was back to being simply gloated over malevolently. The audience was closing. That vicious pain came back, inescapable this time. Something was all wrong about this. I said no. I will not be your servant. I will not be your servant. I cried. Leave this space now. The pain in my head was maddening as this invisible entity latched himself onto my skull, over the crown chakra and pressing in at the hollow at the base of the skull. I found my perceptions being poked and prodded, seeking to maximize the painful and fearful effect. I did not let my shifting perceptions affect my centered and collected core. I sealed off my mind, a little protected kernel at the center of all the painful, fearful sensations I was experiencing. I rode out the duration of the tryptamine flash. You cannot break my mind, I am too powerful. I can withstand whatever you throw at me. Your mind games do not trick me. Again I cried out, I will not be your servant. The pain in my head stepped up another notch. This is sacred space, you cannot be here. This house is protected, you cannot be here. I pictured the diamond-shaped protection rune encircling the entire house. With finality and strength in my voice, leave this space now. The grip on my skull loosened and I shrugged him off, but he remained hovering in the ether. I began burning of Russian sage, to clear the area. At first my movements were shaky and hasty. I took the time to be calm and collected again and then proceeded smoothly with the smudging. The dull pain was still there, tingling. This was one relentless creature. If you try to stay, I warned him, you have not just me to face. I was thinking of two of my roommates particularly, male and female, and powerful. You will not be tolerated in this space. We will throw you out. Leave now, and never come back. Still spitting venom, the treaty was made. I opened the window wide to allow his passage and watched as something I couldn't see except as maybe a slippery oily sheen to the air, slowly pulled up its foul tentacles, its trailing eyeballs and cytoplasmic brain netting devices, and dragged itself out of my house. Hopefully he didn't slip across the street to terrorize someone else's sleep. Be careful what you wish for. I had asked for something different, something I haven't seen before. Instant manifestation. I talked about this experience with one of my roommates the next day. He explained to me that any entity that shows up during a DMT experience is an entity that I have called in. They can try any trick in the book, manipulating my perceptions and emotions, trying to get me to give them power over myself. But ultimately, they have no power of their own over us except that which we give them. Any entity which I call in must conform to my will, if asked enough times and with enough strength. This is a good thing to know when entering DMT space. When interacting with entities on the energetic plane, there is no way for them to hide their intentions towards us. My intuition on this one went off. There was something ill-intentioned and malevolent about this entity. It is wise to trust your intuitions, in cases like this. Beware the psychic vacuum cleaner. Not all entities in DMT space are friendly. I learned a lot from this experience. It reminded me of the importance of stating my intentions very clearly and consciously before going into the experience. A conscious statement of intent serves to focus the experience, and I can rest assured that whatever I experience will be within my intent. After this experience, I started specifically inviting only those entities who are friendly, helpful, benevolent and of positive intention for the good of all beings.